They say an alpha's power is in his roar, but the truth is, it's in his silence. Caleb Blackwood, the Alpha King of the most feared pack in the north, vanished for 2 years. His pack thought he was dead. His enemies thought they had won. But Caleb didn't die. He returned not as a king in velvet, but as a beggar in rags. He wanted to see who remained loyal when the gold was gone. He expected betrayal. He expected cruelty. What he didn't expect was her, Thomas, the pack's poorest Omega, starving and broken, who looked at a dirty beggar and saw a human being. She offered him her last piece of bread, unaware that the hand she touched held the power to destroy the world. This is the story of the Alpha King's test. The rain in Blackwood Ridge didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Caleb Blackwood pulled the hood of his tattered canvas jacket lower over his eyes. The fabric smelled of wet dog and diesel fumes, a perfect disguise for the man who technically owned everything as far as the horizon stretched. To the people walking past him on Main Street, he wasn't the Alpha King who had united the Northern Territories. He was just another piece of trash, another casualty of the economic downturn that had hit the Packlands hard in his absence. 2 years. That's how long he had been gone. The official story was a diplomatic tour in Europe. The reality was a coma in a private clinic in Zurich after an assassination attempt that had nearly claimed his wolf. Now he was back. But before he walked into the pack house and took his throne, he needed to know who had planted that bomb in his car. Caleb limped intentionally, favoring his left leg. He leaned against the brick wall of Sal's Pit, a greasy spoon diner that used to be a respectable establishment. Now the neon sign flickered ominously, the S burnt out, so it just read Al's Pit. Through the grimy window he watched the hierarchy of his pack play out in real time. In the center booth sat Jackson Thorne, the beta's son. Jackson was wearing a leather jacket that cost more than most families in this town made in a year. He was laughing loud and obnoxious, knocking a glass of water onto the floor. "Clean it up, runt!" Jackson barked. Caleb's eyes shifted. Rushing from the kitchen was a girl who looked like a strong wind might snap her in half. This was Thomas Vance. Caleb knew the name from the dossiers he'd studied. She was 21, an Omega. Her father had been the pack's accountant before he was accused of embezzlement, and exiled a charge Caleb now suspected was framed by the very people running the town. Thomas had stayed behind to care for her sick younger brother Toby, bearing the shame of her father's name. She was thin, her uniform hanging off her shoulders. Her hair, a mousy brown, was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and skipped meals. "I'm sorry, Jackson," Thomas murmured, dropping to her knees with a rag. "That's sir to you, traitor blood," Jackson sneered. He kicked the bucket of dirty water she had brought over. It sloshed over her shoes that were held together with duct tape. The entire diner went silent. No one moved. No one helped. The fear in the room was palpable. The pack had lost its way. Without a strong alpha, the bullies had taken over. Caleb felt his wolf Fenrir growl low in his chest. "Let me tear his throat out," the beast urged. Not yet, Caleb thought, clenching his fists inside his pockets. "We need proof." Thomas didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just cleaned up the mess, her jaw set tight. When she finished, she retreated to the back alley to take out the trash. That was where Caleb made his move. He slid down the wall, sitting in the mud next to the dumpster, looking for all the world like a man at the end of his rope. The heavy steel door creaked open. Thomas stepped out, struggling with 2 heavy black bags. She heaved them into the dumpster, then leaned against the brick wall, exhaling a shaky breath. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small foil-wrapped package. It was a bread roll. Not fresh, probably something a customer had left behind, or something that had gone stale. She unwrapped it like it was gold bullion. Her stomach gave a loud, painful growl that echoed in the quiet alley. Caleb let out a ragged cough. Thomas jumped, her eyes darting to the shadows. "Who's there?" "Just a ghost," Caleb rasped, deepening his voice, making it sound dry and unused. "Didn't mean to scare you, miss." Thomas squinted. "You're soaking wet." "Rain tends to do that," Caleb said. "Got a smoke?" "I don't smoke. Bad for the lungs." "Worse for the wallet," she said, her voice softer than he expected. She took a step closer, not backing away like most did. She sniffed the air. As a werewolf, she would smell the dirt and sickness on him, a scent he had carefully applied using herbal mixtures to mask his alpha pheromones. "You're wolf, you're not rogueless, are you?" "Packless," Caleb lied, just passing through, hoping the king might have some mercy. Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "The King Blackwood hasn't been seen in years, and the people running this place—" She looked back at the door where Jackson was holding court. Mercy isn't in their vocabulary. She looked at the bread in her hand. Then she looked at Caleb. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She was hungry. Starving, actually. That roll was probably her dinner. But then she did the unthinkable. She broke the roll in half. She walked over to him, crouching down eye level, not looking down on him, and held out the larger half. "It's sourdough," she said. "It's a little hard on the crust, but the inside is okay." Caleb stared at her hand. It was red from the cold and calloused from hard work. "Why?" he asked. "You look like you need it more than me." "My brother Toby. He says that if we stop being human, the bad guys win," Thomas whispered. "Take it, please, before Jackson comes out and sees." Caleb took the bread. His fingers brushed hers. A spark, electric and undeniable, shot up his arm. "Mate!" His wolf roared. "Mate!" Caleb shoved the feeling down. He couldn't claim her. Not like this. Not while she was vulnerable and he was in disguise. It would be manipulation. "Thank you," Caleb said, his voice genuine for the first time. "What's your name?" "Thomas," she said. "I'm Cal," he said. "You have a good heart, Thomas. That's dangerous around here." "I know," she said, standing up as the back door banged open. "Vance! Where's my coffee?" Jackson shouted from inst. Thomas flinched. She gave Caleb one last look, a mixture of pity and solidarity, before rushing back inside. Caleb took a bite of the stale bread. It tasted like ash, but as he chewed, he made a vow. He wasn't just going to purge the pack of traitors. He was going to burn Jackson Thorne's world to the ground, and he was going to lay the ashes at Thomas's taped-up feet. Caleb didn't leave. He spent the night huddled under the awning of an abandoned grocery store across from the pack house, watching the comings and goings. The Blackwood pack house was a mansion that had stood for 200 years. Now it looked like a frat house. High-end sports cars littered the driveway. Guardsmen Caleb didn't recognize, likely mercenaries hired by Beta Marcus Thorne, patrolled the perimeter. The next morning the town was buzzing. A black sedan with the royal seal had arrived at the border. The rumors were flying. "The king is returning." Caleb smirked. He had sent the car. It was empty, driven by a loyal human associate. It was a decoy to panic the rats. He needed to get inside the pack house. He needed to see Beta Marcus's ledgers. He shuffled his way to the servants' entrance at the back of the estate. A burly guard with a nose ring stopped him. "Lost old man. Heard you needed a janitor," Caleb mumbled, keeping his head down. "For the party." The guard laughed. "Yeah, we do. The last one quit after Jackson used him for target practice. You look like you can take a beating. Get inside. Kitchen staff will sort you out." It was that easy. Security was lax because they were arrogant. Inside the kitchen was chaos. Preparations were underway for the Welcome Home Gala. The irony was suffocating. They were throwing a party for a king they hoped was dead just to keep up appearances. And there she was again. Thomas. She wasn't serving tables here. She was scrubbing the floor near the walk-in freezer. It seemed she had a second job. "You again," she whispered, nearly dropping her scrub brush when she saw Caleb limping by with a mop bucket. "I needed the work," Caleb muttered. "They said $5 an hour." "That's illegal," Thomas hissed, checking over her shoulder. "Marcus pays under the table so he doesn't have to pay taxes to the crown." "Smart," Caleb said. "Corrupt," she corrected. "Listen, Cal, you need to keep your head down. Tonight is going to be bad. Beta Marcus is on edge because of the king's car arriving. If anything goes wrong, they'll blame the help." "Thomas!" A sharp voice cut through the kitchen. A woman in a tight red dress clicked into the room in high heels. It was Sheila, the head Omega, and unfortunately, Marcus's mistress. "Stop flirting with the vagrant and get the silver polished," Sheila snapped, "and tell your brother that if he coughs during the speech tonight, I'm throwing him out into the rain." Thomas's face paled. "Toby is here. I thought he was at the clinic." "Clinic wouldn't take him. Card declined." Sheila smirked, cruel satisfaction. "He's in the servants' quarters. Try not to let him die before the appetizers are served. It ruins the appetite." Sheila spun on her heel and left. Thomas looked like she was going to be sick. She dropped the brush and ran toward the servants' quarters. Caleb abandoned his mop and followed her, sticking to the shadows. The servants' quarters were essentially a damp basement. In the corner, on a cot made of pallets, lay a boy of about 10. He was shivering violently, his skin pale and clammy. "Toby!" Thomas gasped, rushing to him. She felt his forehead. "You're burning up." "I'm sorry, Ellie," the boy wheezed. "I tried to be quiet." "It's not your fault," she soothed him, pulling a thin blanket tighter around him. "I need to get you medicine. The wolfsbane fever. It's getting worse." Caleb froze in the doorway. Wolfsbane fever. It was a rare, manufactured illness, usually caused by poisoned water supplies in the mines. "I need $50 for the shot," Thomas whispered to herself, tears finally spilling over. "I only have 10. Caleb stepped out of the shadows. He reached into his pocket. He didn't have his royal credit cards, those would be tracked. But he had a single, heavy gold coin. An old Alpha tradition. A challenge coin. It was worth thousands to a collector, but to a pawn shop it was worth at least its weight in gold. "Thomas," he said softly. She jumped, positioning herself between Caleb and Toby. "Cal, you shouldn't be down here." "Take this," he said, holding out the coin. She stared at it. It was stamped with the Blackwood crest, a wolf devouring a son. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her eyes widening. Did you steal this from upstairs?" "I found it," Caleb lied. "Years ago, before I lost my way. Sell it. Get the medicine." "I can't." She shook her head. "If they catch me with this, they'll kill me. It's royal currency." "Then give it to me," Caleb said. I'll go. Nobody looks at a beggar, Thomas. Everybody looks at a pretty girl. She hesitated. The trust in her eyes was fragile like glass. She looked at her brother, who let out a pained whimper. Okay, she whispered. There's a pawn shop on 4th. Ask for old man Miller. He knew my dad. He won't rat us out. Caleb nodded. He took the coin back. Stay with him. I'll be back before the party starts. As Caleb walked out of the basement, his limp vanished. He moved with the predatory grace of a killer. He wasn't going to the pawn shop to sell the coin. He was going to the pawn shop to make a call to his enforcers. The test was effectively over. He had seen enough poverty and cruelty. Now he needed reinforcements. Tonight, at the Welcome Home Gala, the Alpha King wouldn't just be arriving. He would be cleaning house. But first he had to survive the next 4 hours, because as he slipped out the side door, he collided chest first with Beta Marcus Thorne. Marcus, a man built like a tank, with cold, dead eyes, grabbed Caleb by the collar of his ragged jacket. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus growled, sniffing the air. "You don't smell like a janitor. You smell like blood." Caleb stared into the eyes of the man who had betrayed his father. He forced himself to cower. Just the trash man, sir," Caleb stammered. Marcus narrowed his eyes. He didn't let go. "Take him to the security room." Marcus ordered the guards behind him. "I want to know why a bum smells like high-grade wolfsbane and old money." Caleb's heart hammered, not in fear, but in anticipation. Good, he thought. Take me right to the center of your operation. The security room smelled of stale cigar smoke and ozone. It was a windowless concrete box in the bowels of the pack house, soundproofed for reasons that became immediately obvious as Jackson Thorne slammed Caleb's head onto the metal table. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Jackson sneered, rolling up the sleeves of his expensive silk shirt. "Who sent you? Was it the Southern Pack? Are they spying on my father?" Caleb tasted copper. His lip was split. He let his head loll to the side, playing the part of the broken vagrant. "I told you, I'm just hungry," he wheezed. "I just wanted bread." "Bread!" Jackson laughed, a sharp barking sound. He turned to the 2 guards standing by the door. "He wants bread. Get the taser. Let's toast him a little." As the guards chuckled and fumbled for their equipment, Caleb's senses were expanding. He wasn't focusing on the pain. Pain was an old friend. He was focusing on the room next door. His alpha hearing sharper than any regular wolf's pierced through the concrete wall. In the adjacent office, Beta Marcus was pacing. Caleb could hear the heavy tread of his boots and the frantic scratching of a pen. Marcus was on the phone. "I don't care that the car is here," Marcus hissed into the receiver. "If Caleb is in it, we stick to the plan. The bomb is rigged under the podium. As soon as he steps up to address the pack, boom. We blame it on rogue rebels. If the car is empty, I announce the regency tonight. Either way, by midnight, I am the Alpha." Caleb's heart slowed to a predatory rhythm. The podium. He had the confession. He knew the plan. Now he just had to survive the next 10 minutes. Jackson turned back to him, the taser crackling with blue electricity. "Last chance, old man. Who are you?" Caleb slowly lifted his head. The groveling demeanor evaporated. His eyes, usually hidden by grime and shadows, flashed a brilliant molten gold, the sign of a royal alpha. "I'm the one who's going to teach you manners," Caleb said, his voice dropping an octave, resonating with a power that vibrated the metal table. Jackson froze. The instinctual fear of a lower-ranking wolf kicked in before his brain could process what was happening. What the? Caleb moved. He didn't need to transform. He snapped the handcuffs, linking him to the table as if they were made of paper. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Jackson's wrist, twisting it until the bone audibly snapped. Jackson screamed, dropping the taser. Caleb caught the device in midair. He spun, firing the prongs into the first guard's chest. The man went down, convulsing. The second guard reached for his sidearm, but Caleb was already there. He swept the man's legs, driving a fist into his temple before he hit the ground. It took 6 seconds. Jackson was on the floor, clutching his broken wrist, sobbing. "Who are you? Are you? You're a monster." Caleb crouched over him. He grabbed Jackson by the throat, squeezing just enough to cut off the air. "I'm not a monster, Jackson. I'm a consequence," Caleb whispered. "You like kicking people when they're down. You like starving women. Let's see how you like the dark." Caleb ripped a strip of cloth from Jackson's shirt and gagged him, then dragged him into the supply closet, locking it from the outside. He checked his pockets. The gold coin was gone. Marcus had taken it. But Caleb didn't need gold anymore. He needed to get to the ballroom. But first he had a promise to keep. He slipped out of the security room, moving like a shadow through the corridors he had grown up in. He found the infirmary supply closet, unlocked, laziness again. He grabbed a vial of the wolfsbane antidote and a syringe. He navigated the back halls to the servants' quarters. The house was vibrating with music now. The bass of the sound system thumped through the floorboards. Thomas was where he left her, dipping a rag in cool water and dabbing Toby's forehead. The boy was barely conscious. "Cal," Thomas gasped as he slipped into the room. She looked at his split lip. "Oh my God, they beat you. I told you, you have to leave." "I got it," Caleb said, holding up the vial. Thomas's hands flew to her mouth. You stole it. They'll kill you." "Let them try," Caleb said grimly. He knelt beside the boy. "Hold his arm." Thomas didn't hesitate. She trusted this strange beggar more than she trusted the pack doctor. She held Toby's thin arm steady. Caleb administered the shot with surprising gentleness. Within moments, Toby's breathing eased. The color began to return to his cheeks. "He'll sleep now," Caleb said. "By morning, the fever will break." Thomas slumped against the wall, tears streaming down her face. She reached out and grabbed Caleb's hand, his dirty, calloused hand, and pressed it to her cheek. "Thank you," she sobbed. "I don't know who you are, Cal, or why you're helping us, but I swear I'll pay you back. I'll work extra shifts. Thomas, Caleb cut her off gently. He looked at her, really looked at her. Under the stress and the exhaustion, she was beautiful. Not because of her features, but because of her spirit. She was the only thing in this house that wasn't rotten. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Now I need you to do something for me. It's going to be scary." She wiped her eyes. "Anything. Go upstairs. Go to the gala. Serve the drinks. Keep your head down, but keep your eyes on Marcus. When the clock strikes 10, I want you to stand near the main doors." "Why?" she asked, trembling. "That's when the Alpha King is supposed to arrive." Caleb stood up, towering over the small room. He pulled his hood up, hiding his face once more. "Exactly," he said. "Don't be afraid, Thomas. Tonight the hierarchy changes." The grand ballroom of Blackwood Manor was a spectacle of excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars dripped light onto the marble floors. Tables were laden with roasted meats, towers of seafood and fountains of chocolate, enough food to feed the starving village for a month, all destined to be thrown away in the morning. The guests were the elite of the werewolf world, or at least the ones corrupt enough to do business with Marcus Thorne. They wore diamonds and velvet, laughing loudly, their glasses clinking with vintage champagne. Thomas moved through the crowd like a ghost in her black uniform. She held a tray of flutes, her arms aching. Every time she passed a table, she smelled the rich scents of perfume and cologne, masking the underlying rot of the pack's soul. Watch it, rat. Tiffany, a high-ranking female wolf with sharp features and sharper claws, elbowed Thomas as she walked by. Thomas stumbled. The tray tipped. 3 glasses of champagne shattered on the floor, splashing onto Tiffany's white gown. The music didn't stop, but the conversation in the immediate vicinity did. "You clumsy little bitch!" Tiffany shrieked. "Do you know how much this dress cost? It's worth more than your life!" Marcus Thorne, who had been holding court near the stage, turned around. His face darkened. He didn't see an accident. He saw a disruption to his perfect night. "Clean it up," Marcus barked, his voice carrying across the room. "And then get out of my sight. You're fired, Vance, and take your dying brother with you. I want you both off Packlands by midnight." Thomas fell to her knees, picking up the glass shards with her bare hands. A shard sliced her thumb, blood welling up to mix with the spilled champagne. She blinked back tears. Fired. Exiled. This was a death sentence. Without the pack's protection, rogues would kill them within a day. "Please, Beta Marcus," she whispered, head bowed. "I have nowhere to go." "Not my problem," Marcus spat. He kicked a piece of glass toward her face. The room chuckled. It was a cruel, nervous sound. They enjoyed the show of power. It made them feel safe to be on the side of the bully. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the far end of the ballroom groaned. A hush fell over the room. It was 9:55 p.m. The king's car had been parked outside for 20 minutes, but no one had emerged. Marcus straightened his tie, a smug smile spreading across his face. He signaled the band to stop. He walked up the steps to the podium. The very podium Caleb had heard was rigged with explosives. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus boomed, his voice amplified by the microphone. "It seems our beloved king has been delayed, perhaps indefinitely." A murmur of feigned shock went through the crowd. "The Northern Territories cannot stand without a leader." Marcus continued, gripping the sides of the podium. "We are weak, we are vulnerable, and it is with a heavy heart that I must step forward. If Caleb Blackwood will not lead, then I—" Boom! The doors didn't just open, they were blasted off their hinges. Splinters of wood and twisted metal flew into the room. The crowd screamed, scrambling back. The guards drew their weapons, pointing them at the swirling cloud of dust and rain that billowed in from the stormy night. Marcus froze on the stage, his eyes wide. From the dust, a figure emerged. He was limping, but it wasn't a limp of weakness anymore. It was a rhythmic, terrifying cadence. He was covered in mud. He wore a tattered canvas jacket that smelled of the dumpster. His boots were held together with tape. It was the Beggar. It was Cal. The crowd gasped. Some laughed nervously. "Who let the stray in?" someone shouted. "Security, kill him!" Marcus roared, pointing a shaking finger. But the guards didn't fire. They couldn't, because as the Beggar walked into the light of the chandeliers, the air in the room changed. The pressure dropped. The temperature plummeted. A low, vibrating hum filled the space, rattling the crystals and making the champagne glasses tremble on the tables. It was alpha aura, pure, concentrated, and overwhelming. Weaker wolves in the room fell to their knees instantly, their instincts forcing them to submit to a superior predator. Even Tiffany dropped to the floor, whining like a puppy. Thomas, still on her knees amidst the broken glass, looked up. Her eyes met Cal's. He wasn't looking at Marcus. He wasn't looking at the guards. He was looking at her. He stopped 10 feet away from her. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, terrified of the energy radiating off him. "You told me to leave!" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking, trying to fight the submission instinct. "You're just a dirty vagrant. I am the Alpha." Caleb ignored him. He reached down and offered a hand to Thomas. "Stand up, Thomas," Caleb said. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed in every corner of the silent room. "You never kneel to trash." Thomas took his hand. He pulled her up, steadying her. He saw the blood on her thumb. His eyes flared gold, brighter than before. He brought her hand to his lips and gently licked the wound. The cut sealed, instantly healed by the saliva of a royal alpha. The crowd gasped. Only a king could do that. Caleb turned slowly to face the stage. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply unzipped his tattered jacket and let it drop to the floor. Underneath he wore a dirty t-shirt, but around his neck, gleaming in the chandelier light, was a heavy chain made of white gold and obsidian. And hanging from it was the royal signet ring of the Blackwood line. "You asked for the king," Caleb said, his voice cold as the grave. "Here I am." Marcus turned pale, the blood draining from his face. "Impossible. You were in a coma." "The bomb under that podium," Caleb pointed. "I wouldn't stand there if I were you, Marcus. My enforcers disabled the trigger 10 minutes ago, but the C4 is still live. One wrong step." Marcus scrambled off the stage, tripping over his own feet, landing in a heap on the floor. Caleb walked forward, dragging his left leg slightly, the mud from his boots staining the pristine marble. He stopped in the center of the room. "For 2 years," Caleb addressed the crowd, "I watched. I listened. I wanted to see what my pack would become without me." He looked at Tiffany, who was trembling on the floor. He looked at the guards who had beaten him. He looked at the diners who had watched Thomas get bullied. "I saw greed," Caleb said. "I saw cruelty. I saw a pack that had forgotten its code." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the foil wrapper of the stale bread Thomas had given him. He held it up like a holy relic. "I came to my own home as a beggar," Caleb thundered. "I was starving, I was cold, and not one of you, not my beta, not my warriors, not my friends, offered me a hand. You spat on me. You kicked me." He turned to Thomas, who was standing stunned, clutching her healed hand. "Except her," Caleb said, his voice softening. "The girl you treat like a slave. The daughter of the man you framed. She had nothing. She had 1 piece of bread for her dinner, and she broke it in half." Caleb walked over to Marcus, who was trying to crawl away. Caleb planted a boot on Marcus's chest, pinning him. "You wanted to be Alpha, Marcus?" Caleb asked. "An Alpha doesn't feast while his pack starves. An Alpha is the first to bleed and the last to eat." Caleb looked up at the balcony. "Enforcers, secure the room." From the shadows of the balcony, 20 fully armed commandos in black tactical gear rappelled down, weapons trained on the guests. These were the king's personal guard, the ghostly unit known as the Night Watch. They had been waiting for his signal. "Arrest Marcus Thorne for treason and attempted regicide," Caleb commanded, "and arrest Jackson Thorne for being a disappointment." As the guards dragged a screaming Marcus away, Caleb turned back to Thomas. The entire room was watching them. "Thomas Vance," Caleb said formally. "Yes, Your Majesty," she stammered, starting to bow. "Don't." He stopped her. "I told you. We are equals." He took her hand again. "You shared your bread with a beggar," Caleb announced to the room. "So now the king will share his throne with you." The silence was shattered by a collective gasp. "I, Caleb Blackwood Alpha King, reject all previous courting arrangements," he declared the ancient words, sealing the fate of the pack. "I claim Thomas Vance as my mate, and if anyone has a problem with that..." His eyes flashed gold, and for a split second, a massive spectral black wolf appeared behind him, snarling at the crowd. "They can take it up with Fenrir." Thomas looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "But I'm just an Omega. I'm poor. I have nothing." Caleb smiled, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "You have the only thing that matters, Thomas. You have a soul, and as of right now, you also have my credit card." The morning after the revolution was not filled with sunshine and rainbows. It was filled with lawyers, accountants, and a headache that throbbed behind Thomas Vance's eyes. She woke up not on her lumpy mattress in the servants' quarters, but in a bed the size of a small island. The sheets were Egyptian cotton cool against her skin. For a panicked second, she thought she had overslept for her shift. She scrambled up, reaching for her uniform, only to realize it wasn't there. Instead, a silk robe hung on a mannequin in the corner. Memory flooded back. The beggar, the bread, the explosion, the declaration. She was the Alpha's mate, the Queen of the North. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the pack-house grounds were swarming with enforcers. Trucks were being loaded with files, seized from Marcus's office. The door clicked open. It wasn't a servant. It was Caleb. He was clean now. Shaved his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a stark contrast to the rags he'd worn for days. But his eyes were the same tired, ancient, and golden. "Sleep well?" he asked, holding 2 mugs of coffee. I think I passed out," Thomas admitted, pulling the duvet up to her chin. "Caleb, Your Majesty, is this real?" "Call me Caleb, sir," he said, handing her a mug. "And yes, it's real. Toby is in the private medical wing. The best doctors in the state are with him. His fever broke an hour ago. He's asking for pancakes." Thomas let out a sob of relief, burying her face in her hands. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "I need to tell you something, Thomas," Caleb said, his voice turning serious. "Last night was the easy part. Beating a bully is simple. Cleaning up his mess is hard. Half the Pack Council has resigned in protest. Because you arrested Marcus? No." Caleb looked at her steadily. "Because I chose you." Thomas shrank back. "I knew it. They don't want an Omega. They don't want a maid. They don't want someone they can't control," Caleb corrected. "The elite families, the Vanderbilts, the Greys, the Thorns, they view marriage as a merger. They wanted me to marry a rich heiress to consolidate power. By choosing you, I insulted their bank accounts." He stood up, walking to the window. "They are going to come for you, Thomas, not with claws, but with words, with rumors. They will try to break you, so I am forced to reject you. I need to know, can you handle them? If you want to walk away, I will give you $1 million and safe passage to anywhere in the world. You and Toby can be free." Thomas looked at the coffee in her hand. She thought about the way the other servants looked at her with hope. She thought about the bread she had shared. "If I leave," she asked, "who takes my place, Tiffany?" Caleb grimaced. "Likely." "Then I'm staying," Thomas said, throwing the covers off. She stood up, wearing one of Caleb's oversized t-shirts she had found. She looked small, but her chin was high. "I've cleaned their toilets, Caleb. I know their dirty secrets. I'm not afraid of a few snobs." Caleb smiled a true, dangerous smile. "Good, because lunch is in an hour, and the vultures are coming." The vultures was the wives of the council elders. They arrived for tea at noon in the blue drawing room. Thomas sat on a velvet sofa wearing a simple blue dress Caleb's stylist had rushed over. Across from her sat Lady Genevieve, the matriarch of the Northern Alliance. She was a woman of 60 with steel-grey hair and eyes that assessed Thomas's worth like she was livestock. "It is a quaint story," Lady Genevieve said, sipping her tea. "The beggar and the maid. Very Disney. But my dear, do you even know which fork to use for the fish course?" The other women tittered. Thomas's hands trembled in her lap. She felt Caleb's presence near the door, but he had promised to let her handle this. If she couldn't handle tea, she couldn't handle the throne. "I suppose I'm a bit rusty on table etiquette," Thomas said softly, "but I am quite an expert on other things." "Oh." Genevieve raised an eyebrow. "Like what dusting? Like the accounting logs?" Thomas said, her voice strengthening. "For instance, Lady Genevieve, I know that your husband's construction company charged the pack $4 million for the new recreation center. But I also know from cleaning the contractor's office that you used substandard cement and pocketed the difference. The cracks in the foundation are already showing." The room went dead silent. The teacup in Genevieve's hand rattled against the saucer. "And Mrs. Sterling." Thomas turned to a blonde woman who had been sneering at her. "Your charity for rogue orphans, I know you only spend 10% on the actual orphans. The rest goes to administrative fees, which seem to pay for your trips to Milan." Thomas stood up. She wasn't the maid anymore. She was the one holding the receipts. "So," Thomas said, pouring herself more tea, "you can teach me which fork to use. I'd love to learn. And in exchange, I won't hand my memory of those ledgers over to the king's forensic accountants. Do we have a deal?" Lady Genevieve stared at her. For the first time, there was fear in the older woman's eyes. "The king has chosen wisely," Genevieve choked out. "More sugar, Your Highness." From the doorway, Caleb watched his arms crossed. He didn't intervene. He didn't need to. His queen had just drawn first blood, without unsheathing a single claw. 2 weeks later, the Pack Tribunal convened. It wasn't a normal court. It was held in the stone circle, an ancient amphitheater carved into the granite cliffs overlooking the ocean. This was where alpha law was dispensed. Marcus Thorne sat in the center of the pit, chained with silver cuffs that dampened his wolf ability. He looked haggard, but his eyes were still defiant. He didn't look like a man who was about to be executed for treason. He looked like a man waiting for a bus. Caleb sat on the high stone, the Alpha's seat. Thomas sat beside him on a slightly smaller stone chair. The wind whipped her hair, but she didn't flinch. "Marcus Thorne." Caleb's voice boomed over the roar of the ocean. "You are charged with embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and high treason. How do you plead?" "I plead necessity." Marcus spat. I did what I had to do to save this pack from a weak leader who vanished for 2 years. I didn't vanish, Caleb said calmly. I was recovering from the bomb you planted. We have the receipts for the explosives, Marcus, paid for by a shell company registered in your name. Circumstantial, Marcus yelled. You can't prove I ordered the hit. Call the first witness, Caleb signaled. The heavy wooden gates opened. The crowd, hundreds of pack members watching from the stone benches, gasped. It wasn't a forensic expert. It was Thomas. She walked down into the pit. She refused to look at Marcus. She walked straight to the witness stone and placed her hand on the runic carving. State your name, the elder lawkeeper intoned. Thomas Vance, daughter of Arthur Vance. And what evidence do you bring? Thomas reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out a bread roll this time. She pulled out a battered leather-bound notebook. My father was the pack accountant. Thomas spoke into the microphone. When he was accused of stealing and exiled, he swore he was innocent. He died in the rogue lands, broken and ashamed. But before he died, he gave me this. She held up the notebook. He kept a shadow ledger, Thomas said. Every transaction Marcus Thorne made. Every bribe. Every theft. He wrote it down in code. It took me 3 years to decipher it. She looked at the crowd. Marcus didn't just steal money. He stole the water filters for the lower district, causing the sickness. He stole the pension funds for the veterans, and he framed my father to cover his tracks. She turned to Marcus. You killed my father with your lies. You tried to kill my brother with your greed, and you tried to kill your king with your ambition. Marcus laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. A shadow ledger written by a dead traitor. It proves nothing. It's her word against mine. Not just hers, a voice boomed from the back of the amphitheater. The crowd turned. Standing there was a man in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. He was frail, missing a leg, but his face was recognizable to the older generation. It was Silas, the former head of security, who had disappeared the same night Caleb was bombed. I saw Marcus plant the bomb. Silas rasped, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the circle. He caught me. He tortured me. He cut off my leg and threw me in the canyon to die. But I crawled out. I've been hiding in the caves waiting for the Alpha to return. The crowd erupted. This was the final nail. The screaming for blood was deafening. Caleb raised his hand for silence. The judgment is clear. Marcus Thorne, you are sentenced to— Wait, Marcus screamed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by sheer panic. I didn't do it alone. I was just the executioner. I didn't have the money to hire the assassins in Zurich. I didn't have the connections to buy military-grade sieve ore. Caleb paused. The air in the circle grew heavy. Speak! Who backed you? Marcus looked up at the high stone. His eyes didn't lock on Caleb. They locked on the woman, sitting in the VIP box, the woman who had sipped tea with Thomas just weeks ago. It was her, Marcus shrieked, pointing a shaking finger. Lady Genevieve. She wanted the king dead, so her son could take the throne by blood, right? She funded everything. She is the Viper of the North. The entire stadium turned to look at Lady Genevieve, Caleb's aunt, the woman who had raised him after his parents died. Genevieve stood up slowly. She was dressed in immaculate black. She didn't look panicked. She looked annoyed. The man is deluded, Genevieve said smoothly. He is trying to save his own skin. Check the accounts, Marcus screamed. The Cayman's account. The password is matriarch. Caleb looked at his head enforcer, Alistair. Alistair was already typing on a tablet. After 10 agonizing seconds, Alistair looked up, his face pale. "He's right, Alpha," Alistair whispered. "There is a transfer of $10 million from Genevieve's personal trust to Marcus's shell company, dated 2 days before the bombing." Caleb stood up slowly. The betrayal hit him harder than the bomb ever had. This was family. "Aunt Jen?" Caleb asked, his voice breaking. Genevieve sighed. She smoothed her skirt. "You were too soft, Caleb. You wanted peace treaties. You wanted to integrate with the humans. You were weak. My son Richard would have been a conqueror. I did what was necessary for the preservation of our bloodline." She reached into her purse. "Gun," Alistair shouted, but Genevieve didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out a small glass sphere filled with a swirling purple gas. "If I cannot rule this pack," Genevieve said, her eyes manic, "then no one will." She smashed the sphere on the stone floor of the VIP box. "Wolfsbane gas!" Caleb roared. "Everyone get down!" The purple cloud exploded outward, heavier than air, cascading down the steps of the amphitheater toward the crowded pit where Thomas and the witnesses stood. It was a military-grade neurotoxin, lethal to wolves within seconds. Caleb didn't think. He didn't calculate. He leaped from the high stone. A 40-foot drop. He shifted in mid-air, his clothes shredding as the massive form of Fenrir. His black alpha wolf burst forth. He landed in front of Thomas, shielding her body with his own massive bulk. He roared a sound that shook the cliffs, creating a shock wave of sound to try and blow the gas back. But the cloud was too fast. It enveloped them. "Caleb," Thomas screamed as the purple fog swallowed the world. The purple fog rolled over them like a living thing, heavy and tasting of copper. Inside the cloud, silence reigned. The wolfsbane gas was a neurotoxin designed specifically to sever the connection between a shifter and their wolf spirit. For an alpha as powerful as Caleb, the effect was catastrophic. The massive black wolf Fenrir convulsed on the stone floor. His whimpers were like grinding tectonic plates. He had taken a breath meant for Thomas, inhaling a lethal dose to shield her. Thomas coughed, her eyes streaming, but she didn't fall. She was an Omega. Her wolf was small, dormant, and weakened by years of malnutrition and suppression. Ironically, the very poverty that had made her an outcast now saved her life. The toxin searched for a powerful beast to kill, and finding only a whisper of a wolf in her, it passed her by leaving her dizzy, but conscious. "Caleb," she screamed, dropping to her knees beside the giant wolf. His golden eyes were rolling back. He was suffocating his body, fighting a war against itself. Around them, the chaos was absolute. The pack elite in the VIP boxes were scrambling, trampling each other to escape the rising fumes. But the exit was blocked by the panic. Thomas looked at the ocean thrashing against the cliffs, just 50 yards away. The wind was blowing inland, pushing the gas deeper into the amphitheater. They were trapped. "Help!" she shrieked, looking for anyone standing. Through the purple haze, figures emerged. They weren't the warriors. They weren't the council members. It was the kitchen staff, the gardeners, the rats of the pack. They were pulling their shirts up over their noses, rushing into the danger zone. They were less affected, their wolf spirits weaker, their human sides dominant. "Grab his legs," Thomas commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. "We have to get him to the water. The spray will clear the air." 4 burly groundskeepers grabbed the massive wolf's hindquarters. Thomas grabbed Caleb's thick fur at the scruff of his neck. "Pull," she gritted out. They dragged the 1,000-pound predator across the stone inches at a time, their lungs burning. High above, on the rim of the amphitheatre, Lady Genevieve watched with a handkerchief pressed to her face. She saw the peasants moving the king. Her eyes narrowed. She turned to run toward her waiting helicopter, her heels clicking on the stone. She made it to the parking lot, breathless triumph surging in her chest. She reached for the handle of her sleek black limousine. It was locked. "Driver," she snapped, "open the door." The window rolled down. The driver wasn't there. Instead, sitting in the driver's seat was a 10-year-old boy with a pale face. "Toby," Genevieve gasped. "My sister said you're a bad person," Toby said calmly. He held up the keys. "So I threw these in the drain." "You little wretch!" Genevieve lunged at the car, her claws extending. But before she could strike, a shadow fell over her. She turned. Standing in a semicircle behind her were the pack's mothers, the women whose children had sickened from the bad water, the women whose pensions she had stolen. They held no weapons, only shovels, rakes, and stones. "Get back," Genevieve hissed. "I am the Queen Mother. I will have you all executed." "You have no power here," said Mrs. Higgins, the head laundress, stepping forward. "Not any more." The mob surged forward. There was no bloodshed, just the overwhelming weight of justice. They tackled her, pinning the once untouchable matriarch to the asphalt until the enforcers could arrive with cuffs. Down by the water, the battle for Caleb's life was entering its final minute. They had reached the spray zone. The salt water crashed against the rocks, misting the air and dissipating the gas. But Caleb wasn't breathing. He had shifted back to his human form, lying naked and shivering on the wet rocks, his skin grey. "He's gone, Thomas," one of the gardeners whispered, checking for a pulse. His heart stopped. "No," Thomas whispered. She placed her hands on his chest. It was still. "No!" she screamed. She began CPR, pressing down with all her strength on his sternum. "You don't get to die. You promised to fix this. 1, 2, 3, breathe." She pinched his nose and breathed air into his lungs. She tasted the poison on his lips, but she didn't care. 1, 2, 3, breathe. "Come on, Caleb," she sobbed, tears dripping onto his face. "Fight. You're the Alpha. Fight." Minutes passed. The servants lowered their heads. It was over. The king was dead. Thomas stopped compressing. She slumped over his chest, her forehead resting on his cold skin. She thought of the bread, the way he had looked at her in the alley, not as a servant, but as a savior. "Please," she whispered into his ear. "I'll share my bread with you. Just wake up and eat." Maybe it was the prayer. Maybe it was the lingering Alpha resilience. Or maybe it was simply that Caleb Blackwood refused to leave her alone in a world of wolves. A shudder ran through his body. A violent, ragged cough erupted from his chest. He rolled onto his side, retching up black bile and seawater. "Caleb," Thomas cried, pulling his head into her lap. He gasped, sucking in the salty air like a drowning man. His eyes fluttered open. The gold was dim, but it was there. "Thomas," he croaked, his voice like gravel. Did we win?" Thomas looked up. On the cliff edge, the enforcers were leading Genevieve away in chains. The sun was beginning to break through the storm clouds, casting a beam of light onto the wet rocks. She looked down at the man who had disguised himself as a beggar to find a queen. Yes, She smiled, stroking his wet hair. We won. Now shut up and rest. 6 months later. The sign above the door was simple wood carved with a wolf and a loaf of bread. The Golden Crumb. It was the newest building in Blackwood Ridge, built on the site where Sal's Pit used to stand. It wasn't just a bakery, it was a community centre. A place where anyone, pack member, rogue or human, could get a hot meal for free, no questions asked. Inside, the smell of fresh sourdough filled the air. Thomas Vance, technically, Queen. Thomas Blackwood wiped flour off her cheek. She was wearing a designer dress, but she had an apron over it. She was kneading dough, laughing as Toby, now healthy and running on 2 strong legs, tried to juggle 3 oranges and failed miserably. The bell above the door chimed. The room went quiet. The customers, construction workers, mothers, students, stood up respectfully. Caleb walked in. He didn't limp anymore. He moved with the easy power of a king who had nothing to prove. He was holding a briefcase in one hand and a single red rose in the other. He walked up to the counter, ignoring the bowing crowd. He leaned over the glass display case. "Excuse me, miss," he said, a playful glint in his golden eyes. "I seem to have lost my wallet. Is there anything I can get for free?" Thomas leaned across the counter, matching his smile. "We don't serve beggars here, sir. Only family." "I'll work for it," Caleb said. "I'm good at taking out the trash." "We're all out of trash," Thomas said, looking around the happy, thriving room. "But I do have a fresh batch of sourdough. Warm. Soft inside." "Sounds perfect," Caleb whispered. He walked around the counter. He didn't take the bread. He took her face in his hands and kissed her a kiss that tasted of flour yeast and a promise kept. Outside, the statue of the old kings had been taken down. In its place stood a new monument in the town square. It wasn't a warrior with a sword. It was a woman with a basket and a man kneeling with his hand open. The inscription at the bottom didn't list battles won or enemies killed. It read simply, "In the kingdom of the wolf, the loudest roar is kindness." And that is how the Alpha King found his true strength, not in his claws, but in the heart of the woman who saved him. Caleb and Thomas proved that titles and money don't make you noble. Your actions do. In a world full of Marcus Thorns and Lady Genevieves, be an Thomas. Be the person who breaks their only loaf of bread to help a stranger in the rain. What would you have done if you were in Thomas's shoes? Would you have helped the beggar, knowing the risks? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay wild.